So we just put digsodom.com. That gets you to the official website. The technical stuff is there. There are a bunch of related papers and articles there as well. So if you like the technical side of stuff, we can try to put some animations in there, some PowerPoints you can download on various features of the site. We haven't updated it for a couple of years. We've been too busy. But anyway, the website has a lot of good papers. By the way, there's 3 papers on there you should read. There's going to be a 4th one here in the next week or so. One of them is my response to Bryant Wood on the location of Sodom. Okay. He attacked my position. I attacked him. We're good friends. There's an article on there from Clyde Billington, who attacked my position, and I fixed him. Then Gene Merrill, professor of Old Testament at Dallas Seminary, attacked my position. From a chronological point of view, that paper's on there. That's the quintessential discussion on dealing with biblical chronology. So really focus on that. I think you'll really like that one. Then there's another one that I just finished answering another scholar attacking us from a position. But it includes an attack on my view on Zoe, the location of Zoe. So those are 4 papers that I've written, so I don't have to ever talk about those 4 subjects again. I just tell people, hey, what about this? I said, read the paper. Read this paper. Well, read those 4 papers, and that's pretty much the end of that. Oh, by the way, let me go back. From your smartphone, or if you're like me, from your stupid phone, I never want a phone that's smarter than me. I just keep my old dumb phone. You can text Dig Sodom to 22828. Just text DIGSODOM, send it to 22828. Then it will send you back a little instruction on how to enter your email. You'll just enter your email address from your phone. And you'll be on our update list.
Oh, good.
For the excavation. You will get an update about at least once a month, if not once a week, whenever we feel like it, during the year. And then during the excavation, during the 6 to 8 weeks of excavation every year, which happens in late January through early March, you will get an update from the excavation every day, showing you what came out of the ground, what Tuesday's theory is, which will likely be changed on Thursday, and just the thought and the ideas. So you get to see cool stuff. We throw in a few fun things along the way too. And that brings me to this advertisement. If you would like to go on an excavation, this is the one you should go to. We have to become known in the Middle East as the destination excavation. That's because for the first 8 seasons, we stayed at a 5-star resort spa. We lost the management last year. Our management team that we've been there the entire time, we moved off to greater things. And so we got a new management team constituted of bean counters who just are not working with us the way that the former manager did. And so we moved to a new hotel this year. However, that's a good thing because it's still a really nice hotel. It's up in the town of Magba, about 40 minutes away from the dig site. And so it's still close enough, but Magba is where we always used to go on weekends anyway. And so it gives you a great chance to stay in a nice little Christian, half Christian, half Muslim town. And fantastic place. We love it. We know all the people there. And It's a nice hotel. It's brand new. Never been, most of these beds, by the time we get there, will never have been slept in. A brand new hotel. The good thing is, it used to cost you about, for 2 weeks, not including airfare, you used to be able to come on the dig for about $2,500 for 2 weeks. Now that'll buy you an entire month.
Yeah.
So you can come for 2 weeks. We've got it screwed down to about $500, $600 a week. So it's just as cheap as desert.
Yeah.
Almost, we've got it screwed down pretty tight. And so anyway, that includes all your hotel, it includes all your touring. We take you to Petra, great places. And so it's a turnkey gig. Not only that, but we don't dig in the summer. Remember I said late January to March. We dig in the Jordan Valley. The dig site is 500 feet below sea level. Therefore, the temperatures in the morning are around 55 to 60 degrees, light jacket. By the afternoon, depending upon what day, anywhere from 70 to 80 degrees. It's fabulous dig weather. It's just fantastic. So the perfection of beautiful days. Not only that, you can see more from the top of Tal al-Hammam. You can see more of the Holy Land from that point than any other place in Israel or Jordan. You can see, of course, you're in the Jordan Valley. You can see the north end of the Dead Sea. You can see the line of the river. You have Mount Nebo right behind you. Across the river, you can see the Herodium. You can see the outline of the Herodium. You can see toward Bethlehem. You can see Jerusalem, the East Jerusalem towers on the hill. You can see Jerusalem on the hill. You have Bethel and Ai just to the north. You have Jericho right eyeball to eyeball across the river. You can see up into the throat of the Jordan Valley. It's just phenomenal. If you get tired of digging, you stand up and look around, you can't believe you are where you are. Not only that, it is the most artifactually rich site that I've ever run across. In terms of just routinely finding cool stuff all day, every day. So we guarantee you come dig with us, you find cool stuff, bring your money back. Just kidding about the money back thing. But you will have a great time. It is the best vacation you will ever take in your life. 80 to 85% of the people who come on our dig every year. This year we already have 120 volunteers, not including our staff. 80% of the people are repeats from previous years. You will absolutely love it. So come and dig with us. Well, let's keep going on. We're going to talk about the real Sodom. Talk about later, will the real Pharaoh, the Exodus, please stand up? Will the real Sodom please stand up? Where is Sodom? And I'm going to try to convince you that it's not where most people always thought it was. This is a perfect test case for testing the historical accuracy of the biblical geography. It's a perfect test case. Why? Number one, most scholars don't believe the cities ever existed anyway. Completely fictitious for most people. Especially that fire out of the sky thing. But for three reasons. First of all, most scholars don't believe it existed. Secondly, most scholars who do believe in their existence have searched in vain for them in the southern area of the Dead Sea. They put them in the south area of the Dead Sea. By the way, if you have a Bible map, look in the back, in the map section. That's the uninspired section in the back. If it has Sodom and Gomorrah, and it probably won't, but if it's there, it's going to have a question mark. Almost every Bible has Sodom and Gomorrah in the south part of the Dead Sea with a question mark. Why the question mark? We'll talk about that. So they were looking in the wrong place. The third reason why is that... there we go. We must have gone 3. There we go. If a legitimate, scientifically rigorous investigation into the location of these cities can succeed in finding them, would it not constitute a significant confirmation of the historicity of the text? Yes, it would. Yes, it would. And we think that's exactly what has happened in this case, as we shall see. Now we've gone 12 years of research and now 8 years of excavation. And what we think we've got is the data allowing us to set the record straight on the actual location of Sodom. And we're going to go one up several times. Not just the location. I'm going to show you the features of the city. We now know what it looked like. We now know what the culture was. And so it's going to be quite interesting. A lot of minimalists still resist the idea that the Bible can or should be used in the pursuit of archaeology. My good friend, Dr. Bill Beaver, we hang out together periodically. We had him out a couple of times. And here's what he said a couple of years after we started our excavation project. There was a Wall Street Journal article about our project. And in that journal article, they chased Bill down because they know he likes to attack Bible users in archaeology. And he says this: no responsible scholar goes out with a trowel in one hand and a Bible in the other. Well, I don't like being called irresponsible any more than you do. And, well, what is he, by the way, I know what he means by that. He sounds like he's a tiger with teeth, right? He's a pussycat, and we get along quite well. But I know what he means by that. You can't use archaeology to defend or prove a theological point. It's apples and bananas. You can't stick those two things together. Of course not. Well, here's what I say. No responsible scholar can go digging in the Holy Land without a trowel in one hand and a Bible in the other. In fact, you'd be really irresponsible to do so. It'd kind of be a dumb thing, because the Bible still remains the very best and oldest geographical text we have from the region. So why would you want to ignore it? That doesn't make any sense. But anyway, oh, yeah, I had some fun here. We have a guesser right here. Oops, Bill does use the Bible, doesn't he? Because as far as I can remember, I think the biblical text is the only text from which we have the name Saul. So anyway, he does use the Bible when it fits his needs. All right, so the stories comprising the text of Genesis are serial geographies. This is an important point, because what they do is they take you from place to place to place to place. Nothing happens. There's no person mentioned, no event discussed in the Old Testament unless place is established. There's always place. That's extremely important. So we have these serial geographies going on in the text. Another fact that we can link to that is that ancient Near Eastern writers never, ever made up fictitious geography. Now, I said that in a lecture in Amman a few years ago, and Barbara Porter, head of ACOR, the American Center of Oriental Research in Amman, she was attending a lecture, and she said, Dr. Collins is very dangerous. It's a dangerous thing to say. So what do you mean? I knew what she meant. She said, you should never say never. Scientists should never say never. I said, point well taken. I said, but I am interested in the subject. Can you think of an instance where an ancient writer has created for us a fictitious geography? She said, no, I can't think of one. I said, well, if you do find one, would you please send me that? Because I'm very interested in that subject. And would you also, with it, send me your enumerated criteria whereby you determine it's fictitious? Haven't heard from her. By the way, she did send me an email and said she enjoyed the lecture, so she wasn't too ticked off. But you see what I'm saying here? I'm pretty confident in that. pretty confident. Because I used that, the reason why was because I've used that same argument with Israel Finkelstein in our discussion. And I said, but Israel, ancient people didn't make up fictitious geographies. And he said, you're right. You're right. He says, okay, I'll give you this. You have discovered literary Sodom. That's all I'm going to get out of him. That's great. We've discovered the big pile of ruins from which the etiological legend regarding the destruction of the city of Sodom was developed. Okay. But anyway, this is an important point. And by the way, this is a much more detailed presentation than I normally do. Number one, because we have a little bit more time. But also, I know we have a lot of scientists, engineers, and folks like that who appreciate that sort of thing. So, and I'd rather do the detail. Now, whether or not the characters recorded in the Bible or the events are fact or fiction is immaterial to the geographical discussion. Because those stories are layered over real-world geography. By the way, we have 3 examples of this. You can check these out. Check these out. In Egypt, 2 of them. Tale of Ichabod. Tale of the shipwrecked sailor. Both of those are argued back and forth by scholars as to whether they're fact or fiction. And there's another one. Tale of the dreamy Northwest Semitic tale. Scholars argue about whether the tale and the characters are fact or fiction. But they're all 3 stories are perfectly mappable. All of their travels are perfectly mappable. And in Anson Rainey's excellent, very scholarly Atlas of the Biblical World, published by Karka, called The Sacred Bridge, he has a map, a travel map, for each of those 3 ancient Near Eastern tales. Why? Because they're layered over a real-world geography. And ancient people don't make that kind of stuff up. All right. So, no matter how you slice it, the geography of the Bible, since it's an ancient Near Eastern set of documents, is real. It's not a mythical thing, including the tale of Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, this is something that, you just, as an archaeologist or as a scholar, this is what you sit around and do. This is what sets weird scholars apart from normal people. Because you think about this kind of stuff. For well-known Old Testament cities and towns, how many geographical data points exist in the text by which these biblical sites are placed on maps? How do you get a Bethel, Jerusalem, Jericho, Megiddo, Gezer? How do you get it on the map? Well, you look at the geographical data in the text. They knew Gezer was Gezer before they ever found the boundary stones. Why? Because the geography is plain as day. You look at the text and you say, oh, the text says that this city is near this city or in this region, next to this river, south of this mountain, over here. You just triangulate around the geographical material in the text and voila. You go and look in that area and go, oh, there it is, right there. Big pile of ruins. Must be that. That's how you do it. So I took the top 40. I'm not going to bore you with the top 40, but how about the top 10? Here are the top 10. Now, I have my top 40. But here are the top 10 major identified archaeological sites given biblical names because of the biblical geography associated with them. All right, here they are. Bet Shemesh, 8. There are 8 indicators in the Bible text as to its location. And so it's my number 10. Azekah, mentioned that earlier. Azekah in the Elah Valley has 8. Timnah, you can find 9. Jezreel, 9. 9 indicators in the biblical text. 10 geographical indicators identify Jericho. We have 10 for Hebron, Shechem, 12, Ai, 12. Jerusalem comes in at a whopping 18 different geographical indicators in the text for us to be able to pinpoint the location of Jerusalem. By the way, Jerusalem doesn't have a boundary stone. It says, welcome to Jerusalem. Neither is anybody else except Ekron, which has a nice little one. King of Ekron welcomes you to his precinct. But the Shephelah cities, those are the only two, Gezer and Ekron. Nobody else has a sign. Nobody else has an inscription really identifying the city. Maybe a little one at Lachish. But for these, no. We don't have anything, any inscription from Jerusalem, from what would have been the Canaanite or David's or Solomon's Jerusalem, that says it's Jerusalem. How do we know it's Jerusalem? Because of the geography. Because of the geography. And in that case, the fact that people have been living there consistently since the very beginning, and it never became a pile of ruins. But anyway. Well, what's interesting about this is that Sodom has more geographical indicators as to its location than any other Old Testament city, including Jerusalem. 25 indicators in the biblical text tell us where Sodom should be located. So why is Sodom on the Bible maps with the question marks, or mostly not at all? Why does it rarely appear, and when it does appear, it has a big fat question mark? Why is that? Should this be that difficult with so many geographical indicators in the text? Well, I told you I wasn't going to give you the top 40, but I'll give you the bottom 5. There they are. They'll just go away. Oh, the point of that was, here you have a little town like Yarmuk. 3 little tiny indicators in the text. I mean, barely. But yet it's on the Bible maps, without a question mark. I tried to find it one day. It took me like a half a day to find it. I knew about where the tell was, but man, it's tough to find. Just a little place. But yet, it's on the Bible maps. So why shouldn't Sodom be on the Bible maps? Now, let's go back to the 19th century, because we're going to find that in the 19th century, most scholars located Sodom and Gomorrah at the north end of the Dead Sea, unlike most people today who go to the south end. They located it at the north end of the Dead Sea, and they did it for very good reasons. Here's a Bible map from the 1880s, and this is influenced by scholars like Tristram and Thompson, Wilson, Connors, Salem Merrill, others. Almost all the major explorer scholars hired by various international governments like the Americans and the British to go and explore the land and to map it out and get the details were also interested in biblical sites, and so they looked in the Bible as well. They tried to find it. Look where they put the cities. They put it in the north. So it's at the north end of the Dead Sea. They also have Zoar at the north end of the Dead Sea. They should have read the text a little more there. But there they are, at the north end of the Dead Sea. How did they get there? How did they get to the north end of the Dead Sea? I tell you how, they read Genesis. Right. And I always tell people in so many discussions, they ask questions that if they had read the text carefully, they wouldn't be asking the question. So I just say, read the text carefully. We'll get to that text in a minute. Well, how did they get Sodom and Gomorrah at the south end of the Dead Sea? They got there because they completely ignored the text of Genesis. Now, who's the main culprit here? The main culprit in all this is a little scholar, well, big scholar, big genius scholar, the #1 archaeological scholar, Near Eastern scholar of the 20th century, W.F. Albright. Now, I could tell you stories about Albright, but I won't. Interesting guy. Interesting guy. Where did he put Sodom and Gomorrah? He put them at the south end of the Dead Sea, underneath the shallow water. Why? Because he knew that none of the archaeological sites at the south end of the Dead Sea dated at the time of Abraham. We'll look at that in a minute. But he knew that. So he said, well, it can't be any of these because they're too early for Abraham's time. So, how about the idea that the cities must have been underneath the shallow basin of the Dead Sea? It used to be a plain, and then God destroyed the cities, an earthquake made it sink, and then the water ran in over them, and that's that. Well, that's nice, but it didn't work because now south end of the Dead Sea is thoroughly dried up. And we know that there's not a sherd of pottery in there. Earlier it was said that pottery is forever. Yeah. Fire it out of the skies, I'm going to take out the pottery. Just going to fire it harder. So it's not going away. And it's not there. There's nothing at the south end of the Dead Sea. In other words, ancient cultures, ancient people are not stupid. Now in the modern world, you can't fix stupid. You can educate ignorance, but you can't fix stupid. But today, we coddle our people in our society. People today can be stupid and survive. Because there's other people around who aren't stupid, who have common sense. Stupid is lack of common sense. All that is. So you can be kind of stupid today and still survive because there are people around you that have common sense. Right? Put up stop signs and things like that. But in the ancient world, if you didn't have common sense, you probably weren't going to survive too long. So you don't build your city in an area that periodically floods with water. Not smart. That's why That's why Jericho is where it is. That's why it's 8 kilometers from the Jordan River, and not 3 kilometers from the Jordan River. Because if you were 3 kilometers from the Jordan River, about every 10th or 12th year, you'd get flooded. Same way in the south end of the Dead Sea. Sea rises, sea falls, sea rises, sea falls. You never build it. You never ever build it. It's a stupid thing to do. Well, so it was a stupid idea. He was a genius, by the way. He was a legitimate genius, but sometimes geniuses don't have a lot of common sense. Well, here's something else we decided in the process. I'm not going to say what I just saw you say, Jim. Here's what we find out in the process of this whole research. 100% of scholars who do an evaluation of Genesis chapter 13 put Sodom north of the Dead Sea. 100%. Every scholar that you can find takes the time to do an analysis of Genesis 13 puts Sodom and Gomorrah toward the north end of the Dead Sea. That's what those 19th century explorer scholars did. They flopped the Bible over their saddle horns on their animals, their donkeys or their horses, and they followed the text to their locations. That's what they did. And so we found that all the people who took it seriously go north of the Dead Sea, and they put it in that area. It's a straightforward reading of the Hebrew text. We also found that 100% of scholars who put Sodom and Gomorrah toward the south end of the Dead Sea failed to do an analysis of the biblical text. They completely and totally ignore it, which is tantamount to reading the Hebrew text upside down. I mean, their whole idea is just crazy, as we'll see. So, if you read the text, you go north. Well, we found if you don't read the text, if you don't do an analysis of the text, what's interesting is, in my response to Brian Wood's analysis, in which he ignored Genesis 13, he never deals with Genesis 13, not even in response to my analysis. It's absolutely incredible. Why? Because Genesis 13 is the death of the southern Sodom theory. As we'll see. Now, what I always say, this is a very simple thing. It is not difficult. It is just simply to get the right time, the right place, the right time, with the right stuff. Right place, right time, right stuff. Not difficult. Now here it is. Geography. First thing. How do you locate a biblical city? If you ever decide to go do that, I'm going to give you the formula. Here's how you do it. This is how science works from the text. You start with the text. You take the text, you take that geographical data in the text, and you take it to the location. Theoretically, you make a theoretical map of where it should be located, and then from that georepresentation, you go to the field, you go to the location, you explore, you analyze, and eventually you excavate, and you may or may not find a city. But if you do, then what you have done is you have used archaeology to illuminate or confirm the text. Okay, it works that way. By the way, you can go the opposite direction. You can start with the archaeology. Start with the text, but you can start with the archaeology. So you go digging, you find this big site, you say, well, that looks interesting, I think I'll go excavate that. You begin to go excavate it. And you say, oh, well, this is a really big city. Is there anything on any map? Is there anything to suggest and you look on the map, and you create a geo-representation based on your site, and you go, well, I need to go find out what the name of this city might be. So what do you suppose you're going to do then? You're going to go maybe look for a text, look for the ancient text that might mention cities in this area, and when you find the biblical text, you say, oh, there's a mention of a particular large city in this area at this particular time, and this must be it. So at that point, we could say the text then is used to illuminate the archaeology by providing some historical, sociological, maybe information on the site, about the site. So it can work both ways. This is what I call a dialogical approach to Bible and archaeology. You have to let the text speak to the archaeology, and you have to let the archaeology speak to the text, and that's the way it should be done. The problem with the minimalist is they don't let the Bible speak. The problem with the far-right and fundamentalists is they don't let the archaeology speak to the Bible. Okay? So you've got to do both. All right. What's the right place? What's the right place for the cities of the plain? Now let's look at it. This is geography of Genesis 10. I've got time today to do it. I normally don't do it, but this is part of the puzzle. It says the Canaanites were scattered. The borders of Canaan reached from Sidon to Gerar as far as Gaza, then from Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim as far as Elisha. Okay, so that's a geographic indicator. Here's the way that works. You've got Sidon, Gaza, and Gerar, which gives us basically the coast and the Shephelah. That's what's outlined. Coastal cities in the Shephelah. Then you have Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, and Zeboim unto Lasha, or Laish, in the north. This has given us the Rift Valley. The Rift Valley. Very interesting. All right? So that's the first indicator, geographically, we have in Scripture as to the location of Sodom and Gomorrah. We have the extent of the Canaanite clans. In other words, they have bumped out to the coast, and they have gone into the Jordan Valley, and that's the extent of the Canaanites. Archaeologically, you'll never guess what the actual extent of the Canaanites is. You're looking at it. That's it. The Canaanite culture identifiable from the archaeological record with certain specific cultural complexes that we can look at. That's their extent. They end in the valley and at the coast. Now, we can also look at Joshua 13. I love this passage. It's so accurate. By the way, how would a late Iron Age Judahite priest, if the documentary theories are true, and all these stories are made up, right, by later Israelite or Judahite priests, how would they guess what the extent of the Canaanite clans was and where they were living at a certain period of time, in a time that may as well be as far removed from them as it is from us? We would have a better time with it because we could read their texts. They would have no ability to go back and decipher the language, read the text, do the geography. We do not have James Mishners in the ancient world. The Judahite writers did not have teams of archaeologists and historians to go back and research all the historical background of their tales to make them look historically authentic. No, they didn't. What does Joshua say? The Canaanites lived near the sea and along the Jordan. Oh, look at it again. They lived near the sea. By the way, we found many inscriptions of the Phoenicians, local Canaanites, who took to the sea. Right? They're not sea people. They're not like Philistines. They are local Canaanites who took to the sea, the Phoenicians. They are the only people that actually call themselves in their own documents Canaanites. Phoenicians refer to themselves as the Canaanites. Now, so the Canaanites are living on the coast, and they are living, according to Joshua, in the valley. There they are. Coast and valley. And the valley cities are very important. Now, why Genesis 13? Here we are. Why are we looking at it? It's the only narrative in the Sodom tales, and those run from Genesis really 10 all the way to Genesis 19. In the Sodom tales, there's just this passage and this passage alone that is specifically written to take us to Sodom. It's the roadmap to Sodom. This writer is so specific that as he tells the story, he's giving us direction after direction after direction after direction to get us to the right place. If we follow those directions, we will arrive at the right location. Now, here it is. Now, I've taken out a few incidentals out of the passage, but all the geography is included here, so let's read through it. So Abram went up from Egypt to the Negev, and Lot went with him. From the Negev, he went from place to place. There's that serial geography thing. They're going from place to place until he came to Bethel. To the place between Bethel and Ai, Lot looked up and saw that the whole plain of the Jordan was well watered, like the garden of Yahweh, like the land of Egypt, towards Zoar. Now, I think this particular text says Zoan, but I'm not going to get into it, which is Tanis in Egypt, but I don't think this is actually a Zoar, it's Zoan, and that's just a little textual issue. But we'll just ignore that for right now. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of the Jordan and set out toward the east. Abram lived in the land of Canaan, while Lot lived among the cities of the plain and pitched his tents near Sodom. By the way, if we read it in Hebrew, it's read exactly the same. This is a really good rendering of the Hebrew text. And so just about any text you want. Now, sometimes in your text you will see the word valley instead of plain. Okay, as we see. Now, that word, the word plain, is translated out here 3 times. Well, but I promise you, this word does not mean plain. Here are the Hebrew words. Back up. Here are the Hebrew words for plain, or valley bottom, low place, flat land. Bikat, Emek, Bishor, Arba. This is not one of those. In fact, what we're going to see is that this word translated plain or valley is not a geographical term at all. But yet it's translated plain as if it were some sort of geographical reference. It's not. It's not a geographical term. What we see here is this. The 3 words translated plain, and that same word plain from Genesis 10 all the way through Genesis 19 is the same Hebrew word. And it's this word, kikar. Kikar. Now, what does that word mean, actually? Well, 55 of 68 times it's used in the Old Testament, it refers to a flat piece of metal called a talent. Remember talents of gold, talent of silver, talent of gold. It's a flat, circular ingot, disc of metal. A talent. A talent of gold weighs about 119 pounds. He collected 666 of those in a year. That's a lot of gold. But anyway, talents. Or the word kikar means, okay, I'm from New Mexico, I got to do it. Tortilla. Right? Taco Bell is up there. Tortillas. Flatbread. Flat, circular bread. That's what it means. And by the way, it's used in almost every language in the Middle East. We'll go through it really fast. Here are the equivalent versions of the word. And it just means a talent or a tortilla. It means circle, disc. And so, why do we talk about it? Why? Why do we use this word? It has no geographical application at all outside this handful of, a dozen usages of it in the book of Genesis. So, why is it kikar? I'll tell you why it's kikar. Now, in New Mexico, I don't know Washington, but I know New Mexico, and I know we have a lot of flat-topped hills that we call mesas. Spanish word for table, because they look like tables. The word table, mesa, is not a geographical term. But we call some geography mesas, because they look like tables. See? It's a phenomenological thing. Looks that way. Now, you may do the same thing around here. You know, you have boot heel Italy. That sort of thing. It looks like something, so we call it that. But those are not geographical terms. Same kind of deal. Now, remember, it's the cities of the Kikar. It's the Kikar of the Jordan. So, let's continue. Here it is. I'll do that slowly again. It comes down, the Jordan Valley comes down narrowly from the north. It widens out dramatically 25 kilometers north of the Dead Sea and closes back on the Dead Sea, creating a circle, a disk of the southern Jordan Valley that the ancient people called the Kikar. The Kikar of the Jordan. Here it is from a little bit different angle. By the way, if you look at it, just the raw satellite version, you can see the circle. Now, Abraham didn't have a satellite map. They didn't call it a circle because they're looking at it from this angle. If you stand on it, if you stand around it or stand on it, it looks even more like a circle or a disc. So it's very prominent. This is the disc or the circle, and we just call it a phenomenological secondary reference linguistically because they call it that because it looks like that. Now, the Kikar of the Jordan is north of the Dead Sea. Remember, it's the cities of the Kikar, but it's the Kikar of the Jordan. By the way, what does the word Jordan, Ha-Yarden, mean in Hebrew? It means the descent. The descent of what? Fresh water, which dies when it hits the Dead Sea. Do you suppose that anything called the descent would terminate when it hits the lowest spot on the face of the earth? Can't descend any further than that on this planet. So when the water descends, then it comes down into the valley, and then down the Jordan River. When it hits the north end of the Dead Sea, the lowest spot on the face of the earth, the descent is over. Done. It dies. So therefore, that's pretty easy. Now, therefore, Ha-Yarden never ever refers to anything other than the Jordan River proper. And it never includes any part of the Dead Sea Valley. Never. It's never confused in Scripture. In fact, if you take these passages in Numbers, Deuteronomy, and Joshua here, if you collate these passages together, you will find this. That the Jordan River comes down through its channel from the Lebanon mountains. It enters into the Bay of the Dead Sea at a place called the mouth of the Jordan below Pisgah. Pisgah is right at the north end of the Dead Sea. And so therefore, this is includes all the biblical indicators as to where Jordan is located, and it's all north of the Dead Sea. So the cities of the Kikar of the Jordan would certainly be north of the Dead Sea. But there's more. It says it's watered like the garden of Yahweh. If you go back to the second chapter of Genesis and you look at the Garden of Eden, how's it watered? Springs, and the biggest feature is what? A river ran through it. It says a river bisected the Garden of Eden. It broke into 4 channels when it left the garden, but a river went through it. And so it looks like that. This Kikar is cut right down the middle by the Jordan Channel. But then it says, this area is watered like Egypt. How is Egypt watered? Annually, now they don't rely on rainfall. Annually, the Nile overflows its banks. Miles of it. They would plant behind the receding waters and the newly deposited silt. And that drove the economy of Egypt into a great civilization. Well, he said, this is just like the Nile. Now, it's a Nile in miniature in every way. Hydrologically, the Jordan River overflows its banks pretty radically to several kilometers in the wintertime, not today, but in antiquity. And it receded, and they would plant behind the receding waters. It's a Nile in miniature. So, by the way, that little descriptor would not be lost on a guy who grew up in Egypt. Who's collating and putting this whole account together in his first book? Well, Moses, yeah. Well, he gets it. All right. So here it is. This is the overflooding of the Jordan River. Now we have Jericho on the east side with a spring, but look at all these springs on the other side. The entire Transjordan aquifer dumps right here. It dumps right into the eastern side of the Jordan, north of the Dead Sea. That's why you get all these springs. In fact, even though Jericho, and in fact there are no perennial rivers running into the Rift Valley from the Israel side, from the Palestine side, on the west side, every single wadi almost on the Jordan side is a perennial river, especially the big ones like the Jabbok, the Arnon, the Arnon, and so on. All right, so this is the best watered aquascape in the region. Not only that, but it doesn't get cold. Even in the winter, you can grow crops. They do all winter, still today. All right, the Bible says, in Genesis 13, that Lot could see the entire, and we just use the Hebrew word kol, he could see the entire circle of the Jordan. Okay? And in fact, you can see the entire circle of Jordan. We excavated at Bethel and Ai for 6 years. By the way, there are the traditional sites, Baptidron and Meron. That's traditional Sodom and Gomorrah for most people, south into the Dead Sea. But here's Bethel and Ai, right there. You cannot see those southern sites. Lot could not be in the area of Bethel and Ai, lift up his eye, and see the well-watered plain of the Jordan if it were in the south. Because it's blocked by the hills. You just can't do it. What you can see is that. That's it. You can just catch a glimpse of the north end of the Dead Sea, but you can see the entire circle of the Jordan from the high hills around Bethel and Ai. That's where they were located. Now, the Bible says that he traveled from Bethel and Ai eastward. And from Bethel and Ai eastward. Remember, it's a serial geography. Everything happens in a place. They haven't moved. They came from the Negev to Bethel and Ai. No movement. And so Lot goes from here to Sodom by traveling east. And so, let's look at that. Here's Bethel and Ai. East is that direction. And so, he traveled through the circle of the Jordan, the disk of the Jordan, the Kikar of the Jordan from there. Lot was there, he looked that direction. He saw the circle of the Jordan, therefore Sodom can only be in that location. It cannot be in the south. It makes absolutely no sense to put Sodom in the Dead Sea Valley because there is not one shred of anything in the biblical geography about Sodom that would include the Dead Sea. Right? It's all known. Now, so that's a no-brainer. It was a no-brainer to the 19th century scholars, and it should be a no-brainer to anybody who reads the text. It's so clear. Now, what about the chronology? It's not enough to be in the right place. You have to be in the right time frame. And we can do it again this way. We can go from the text. We can suggest a theoretical chronology. We talked about chronology a little bit this morning. But we can go there. We can say, oh, according to the chronology, the literal chronology, the text says it would be destroyed around 1900 BC. But what if we actually found the site and we excavated it and said it was really destroyed about 1700 BC? Well, then we'd go back and archaeology would cause us to modify or rethink about how we use the numbers in the book of Genesis. We have to rethink the subject. All right? You can do it that way, but you can start with the text and go to the archaeology. You can say, well, it suggests a 1900 BC destruction, but then we excavate it and we allow archaeology then to speak to the text to clarify a 1700 BC destruction, and then we go back to the text and we decide that really what the Bible writers are doing, they're using formulated numbers, not literally base 10 numbers and so on. So that could suggest a whole hermeneutical approach to the Bible, which I do suggest that we use because it solves all our problems, solves all our problems. Now, right time. Abraham belongs to the Middle Bronze Age. Now, there are very few people who would put Abraham before the Middle Bronze Age, but G. Merrill at Dallas Seminary and a few other people put him way back in the 22nd century BC. That's problematic. That's a time called the Intermediate Bronze Age. And by the way, in the story of Abraham, do we not have a city named Jerusalem? Salem? City of Melchizedek? Remember? Did you know that Jerusalem was not occupied from 2350 BC to 1800 BC? So nobody home. Can't put Abraham. The story of Abraham in the time of Jerusalem has no occupants, much less a king. Okay? So be very careful how you throw data together. You have to use all the available data sets, not just one or two. Now, Abraham belongs in the Middle Bronze Age. Albrecht put him in the Middle Bronze Age. Very few people put him anywhere else. Some people put him in the Iron Age, but that's kind of silly. Abraham naturally in the text really belongs to that period. Culturally he belongs to the Middle Bronze Age. Now, Genesis 10, of course, pushes us back. We've looked at that. Genesis 10 pushes us all the way back to the time of urbanization, the early Bronze Age. So if we're going to find Sodom, and we start excavating a site that we think might be Sodom, we better be running into the Middle Bronze Age, and we certainly better be running into the early Bronze Age to get us back to Genesis 10. So, to get the right time frame for Sodom, we've got to have all of that. We've got to have the early Bronze Age, what's sandwiched in between the intermediate, and then the Middle Bronze Age. It's got to be there. If we don't have that in the archaeology, we don't have Sodom. All right. Look at this. I love this. These are all the trade routes in the area. North of the Dead Sea, on the Kikar of the Jordan. Jericho sits at that intersection. By the way, these routes are very easy to identify. And we even have on some of them Roman markers from the Roman period. Because the Romans are walking over the same roads as people did thousands of years before. Okay? The routes are the same. Now look at this across the river. Do you see a major intersection there?
Yes.
Big, major intersection. Now what's interesting about that big, major intersection is, up until our research began to be published, and up until now, still today, it takes 30, 40 years to change people's minds and to get stuff into the literature sometimes. Do you know that the archaeological, not any Bible literature or archaeological literature has anything on that piece of real estate? At those major intersections? There's got to be a city there, but yet there's not a single Jordanian, Israeli, American, European archaeological publication that deals with the Holy Land that has anything on those in that area prior to our research. Guess what? How many EBIDMB sites matching the Kikar city's Sodom criteria actually exist there? This blew me away. Because when I first went over the Holy Land, with Danette and I and some friends had done the basic research, and then we went over to the Holy Land looking to see on the ground what was there. We were looking at everybody's archaeological maps, and there wasn't anything on them. And we were getting a little worried. Do you know what it actually looks like? There is a city at that intersection. It has now turned out to be the largest city, on average, in the entire Bronze Age southern Levant. For 75% of the Bronze Age, this site is bigger than Hatzor. It's bigger than Ashkelon. It's 10 times bigger than Bronze Age Jerusalem or Jericho. There's a big site right there. Oh, there's one there too. Oh, there's another one. There's another one. There's another one. There's another one. Oh, there's a whole bunch of them. Here they are. EBIDMB sites on the eastern Kikar. We're not just looking at a city like Jericho. Jericho has no satellites. We're looking at an entire city-state here. A complex civilization center, one of the highest, we now know is the highest population concentration in the entire southern Levant. The most important central civilization in the entire southern Levant, missed by archaeologists. Completely missed by archaeologists. There they are. They even have names. Here are the Arabic names for them. The Bible, Mustanimrin, here's a bunch of others. The big dog right in the intersection is Tal al-Hammam. It is the largest Bronze Age site in the region. Here she is. That's just the upper tell. You can see the lower tell going off in the distance. We're talking about 100 acres, 62 acres behind the city walls. It has the early Bronze Age. It's a city-state in the early Bronze Age. It's a city-state in the IB. It's a city-state in the NB. And after that, it has a little Iron Age town because there's a 700-year gap. We'll talk about that in a minute. So we have everything possible in what we call the criteria for Sodom satisfied by this site. Now, what about the traditional sites? Could they be Sodom and Gomorrah? Well, here they are, Baba Dra and Numera. Let's quickly evaluate them. Here's Baba Dra. There she is. Destroyed 2350 BC. That's a problem, isn't it? What was the earliest possible date we could squeeze out for Abraham? 2166. Way before Abraham was ever born. Not only that, but it was destroyed and resettled almost immediately. It continued down to 2200, which is still too early for Abraham. But the village was on the wall and it couldn't meet Sodom's criteria. Here's Numera, site so many people think is Gomorrah, but it was destroyed in 2600. So look at this. How can they be Sodom and Gomorrah if Abraham and Lot live in that time frame, but Baba Dra is destroyed there and Numera is destroyed several hundred years earlier? Doesn't work. It's not biblical Sodom at all. Can't be. It's not possible. The traditional sites cannot be Sodom and Gomorrah because they are in the wrong place. They're in the wrong time frame. In this game, you only get 2 strikes and you're out of here. Okay? It's just wrong. Now, follow Mom's right place. It's right time. What's the right stuff? Here's the right stuff. Genesis 19:1 says, Lot sat in the gateway of Sodom. Here's the early Bronze Age city wall. It's 18 feet thick. This is a blockage in the intermediate bronze wall. We have lots of gates in the early bronze. They blocked it because times got a little tough. Here's the Lane Whitmar's reconstruction of one of the many gates from the early Bronze Age. We also have a fortification system going around the site. There's a little topographical version of it. You can see the ramparts. We talked earlier about ramparts. By the way, all the rampart systems were built during the Middle Bronze Age. Late Bronze Age folks only doctored them or fixed them or added to them. But all of them were built during this period. And here's my wife and I standing at the top of the defensive rampart for the upper city. Mom has 2 rampart systems, an outer city rampart and an inner upper city rampart. Here's the inner city rampart. Now I'll give you a distinction. This is the first rampart system built in the southern Levant. Everybody else tried to copy it. Only they didn't copy. It's sort of like what you do today. You know, you have the real thing and then you have the copy. The copies are all made of packed earth. They're engineered fill, earth packed in. Our entire rampart system, top to bottom, 100 feet high, 100 feet wide at the base, 7 feet wide at the top. Our entire rampart system is constructed entirely of mud bricks. Individually made and laid mud bricks. Just to build the rampart system of the upper tell and the lower tell, without the city walls, without anything else, just the rampart system, took between 100 and 150 million mud bricks. Unbelievable. Everybody else looked at that and they said, that's really cool. Well, they went and copied it. They made theirs a packed earth, piled up earth. They made their glossy to make it look similar, but this thing is made of mud bricks. Unbelievable. Whoops. How thick is it? Here's one section that we excavated. What it reveals is that the fortification at this juncture, at this place, with its wall and its defensive system on the outside, with multiple revetment walls, making it we think a multi-tiered rampart with multiple slopes, is over 100 feet thick. At other places, it's over 150 feet thick. Really fantastic. Really amazing. Not only that, another thing about the site that's interesting is it is continuously occupied without break. Without one day of break. For 3,000 years. Amazing. Not only that, but here's the big early Bronze Age city wall, that big 18-foot thick monster. That's the top of it. Mud bricks are still preserved at the top. And I'll tell you why. Because that wall was still being used when they built the new one. And the new one, the Middle Bronze Age city wall, built in Middle Bronze 1 around 1950 BC, the new one is built, the wall is built just inside the other wall. They use the earlier wall as the foundation for the thickest part of their rampart. Then they added additional towers to the outside. So you can see the orange color here giving us the Middle Bronze Age building over the top of this massive wall. It dwarfs the early Bronze Age construction. And you have a penetration in through both walls into the outer Middle Bronze Tower. Here I am standing at that tower. The tower walls are 10 feet thick, really fantastic. We still have a lot of mud bricks. That's why it looks like dirt, because you still have about 10, 12 courses of mud brick sitting on top of the stone foundations today. So here you have an early Bronze Age city wall covered with this new construction for the Middle Bronze Age period. Entrance into that wall, here's the entrance into a second to the gate tower, and then the main entrance to the city at that point. And there's some of our happy folks just merrily being away. And this is part of the gate structure that collapsed, superstructure that collapsed into the gateway. Here's my rough rendering of what the south wall, we know where all the towers are because the Middle Bronze Age city is lying on the surface. Nobody built over that, built just destroyed. Here's laying on the surface. Now here's Lane Mittmeyer, who's done the architectural renderings for about 70 excavations in Israel. This is his first foray into Jordan. Here's Lane and I standing. I'm standing in the tower. He's standing in the gateway. And now, if we just do a little reconstruction, this is exactly based on scale. This is the way the gate looks. So if you rebuild the gate, this is the scale of it. It's absolutely fantastic. By the way, Lane laughs at that. He looks at that and says, "Come on, Steve. This is my little silly representation." He says, "We have to really draw." So he drew the reconstruction of the gate. And here's what it looks like. We'll look at that gate tower from that gate to house behind a bit. Here's just a quick reconstruction of the city during the Middle Bronze Age. And so it has this fantastic glossy around it, 36-degree slope, and the city gate. By the way, we did not know where the city gate was when he put this together. It just so happened that he's always right, and the city gate turned out to be exactly where he drew it. So we didn't even have to change the drawing. So that was pretty cool. Now, all that's really good. In the last few minutes here, I want to show you a couple things. Terms of destruction. Nobody cares about walls and houses and all that stuff, but what people really care about is destruction. Was it really destroyed? Well, on the upper tail, when you get below the Iron Age overburden, you have a meter of black ash and destruction debris. Okay. Here's a brick, one of many from the excavation of the palace on the upper tail, palace that we think is the palace of King Bera of Sodom. The bricks are fired so hard that they ring like porcelain when you hit them with a trowel. Major fire. That's where you see the guy's thumbprints in the mold. Isn't that interesting? Wattle and daub from the roof. Fired like pottery. Major conflagration. Now, at the bottom of the Iron Age overburden, almost 2.5 meters down, we hit a pure sealed locus, sealed Middle Bronze, uncontaminated Middle Bronze Age stratum, in which we found this. Now, since then, we have a lot of these. But this is the first one we had analyzed. Pretty amazing stuff. See, it's a storage jar. It's a wheeled Middle Bronze Age storage jar. See the wheeling marks? But if you flip it over, it's covered in melted glass. Now, they don't glaze their pottery in this period. They don't. Glazed pottery was invented until about 7th century AD. We're talking about the 18th century BC. Right? So, when you look at this shirt, what do you got? You got melted pottery. We had this thing analyzed at New Mexico Tech. They had a lot of fun with it. This glass is actually the clay body itself. It's melted in glass. Now look at, you see this black stuff? This is carbon separation. You start to melt this silica at a very high temperature. So you melt this kaolin at a very high temperature, and what tends to happen is that the carbon starts to burn out. And if you left it at this temperature, whatever temperature this is, I'll tell you what it is in a minute. If you left it at this temperature, that carbon would be gone. A few more seconds, that carbon would just dissipate. Not only that, we start to get nodules of calcium. You get elemental calcium separation as the melt starts to happen. But it's all frozen in time. Carbon didn't dissipate, the calcium didn't burn out. Silica retains it. What's interesting about it is that that thing on the left is a Middle Bronze Age pottery sherd from the time of Abraham. We now know that the surface was flash heated to 8,000 to 10,000 degrees Kelvin. Let me say that again. This is a Middle Bronze Age sherd from the 18th century BC. The surface of which is heated, flash heated, and quickly cooled, by the way, just a flash heat. If it had gone on 10 more seconds, the whole thing would have melted into a little pool of glass. You can see right here that the melt only goes over the edge of the break just a couple of millimeters. It was only molten long enough just to barely lap over the edge of the break and stops. Oh, the stuff on the right is trinitite from ground zero, the first explosion of an atomic bomb. It's identical. Physically, this thing, our pottery sherd happily enjoyed its life in the Kamika 100 microprobe. Kamika 100, what is it? Microprobe, microanalyzer. It's like a glorified electron microscope. You shoot the electron beam through anything, it'll tell you, oh, that's a zircon, it's a quartz, it's this, it's that. It's like, do you know the zircons? I don't have it in the presentation, but the zircons in the center of it are bubbled. They lose their angularity. They're bubbled, but not melted. You know what it takes to do that? The geologist put that up on the screen. She said, you know what it takes to do that to a zircon? This is away from the surface. This is not near the surface. This is over 1/8 of an inch underneath this melt. She said, you know what it takes to do that? I said, well, she says, at least 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's in the middle of the sherd. On the surface, you got to wait to 10,000 degrees Kelvin in a flash to create these effects. When I first handed this sherd to the scientists, we had already, Dr. David Burley, the materials physicist there, had already cut the samples off and prepared them. I handed it to the geologist who was running the Kamika machine, and she says, oh, nice piece of trinitite. They have a world-class geological museum. They have a whole display of trinitite. She says, oh, nice piece of trinitite. Where'd you get it? I said, flip it over. I said, oh, it's pottery. Where'd this come from? I said, just do the test. Now, she knew where it was from, because it all came up with our name on it. But, you know, it's amazing. There it is. That's the science of it. It's identical. Well, it's not just that. We have spread all over the area, and this is the biggest piece of it so far, desert glass. Chunks of silica sand melted into glass. This is a big piece. About, yay, 5-6 centimeters thick. How do you get this? This cannot be produced terrestrially. Every geologist knows that. This is flash heated at a high temperature by an airburst event or an impact. You find this stuff around Meteor Crater in Arizona. You find other places, but you find it in the north of the Dead Sea, all over this area, laying on the surface. By the surface. What happened? Well, not only that, but you got people everywhere. Bodies heated and exploded, putting bits and pieces of folks, little bits of bones, ribs, skull fragments, hip sockets, all over the place. People just heated up and blew up. The rest of them just vaporized, just like you would in a atomic explosion. If you're shielded behind a wall, maybe you might survive an atomic blast. Not here, walls caved over on people. We found them under the walls. Pretty amazing. Human bones scattered all through here. Pieces of toys, wheels off toys, jewelry, pieces of jewelry, scarabs from Egypt from the Hyksos period, from the 18th century. In the gateway plaza, we excavated down to the bottom of the plaza. There's nothing between the swept plaza and this material, which is a ½ meter of consistently black ash. It is as if it rained ash for a while. at one time in this conference talk about the dynamics of airburst events, but airburst events suck the entire landscape, melt it, pulverize it, and send it back down after its entry vortex stops turning. It just rains ash, made mostly of microspherules of silica.
You surmise the ash is basically the pieces of the boulder that was an airburst?
The ash is a little bit of everything. It's agricultural soil, it's the wood of the cities, it's the vegetation, vegetation is destroyed, it's the vegetation, it's everything that was on the key cars sucked up, pulverized, destroyed, and now it's raining down because it's been heated to 20,000 plus degrees Fahrenheit. And it's just raining down where we go. That's what this stuff is. It's amazing. It has the weight and consistency of wheat flour. You know how heavy wheat flour is. You get a 50-pound sack of wheat flour. You get a same-size sack of this stuff, and that's the weight. It's fine, fine ash. It's really incredible stuff. Well, anyway, look at this. Here you have a fallen wall. What's underneath it? Ash. Burning ash. You get this stuff everywhere on the side. This is right on the surface. Look how close we are to the surface. Everything's just completely destroyed. By the way, we even know the directionality of it. On one side of the site, no lead bricks on the foundations. On the south side, southwest side. On the north side of the site, hidden behind upper tail and so on, you still have mud bricks. So we know the direction. The shock wave of this thing just blew everything off the front side, and it's still intact on the back side. That's strange stuff. Bowls, all kinds of artifacts, just like that. Cooking utensils like this, you make flatbread with it. So here they are. You can go to all these places around and you find late Bronze Age sites. This is our last slide here. But look at all this. Everything around it survived. Everybody went happily into the late Bronze Age, except on this side. How many late Bronze Age sites in this area? In fact, how many sites in this area had any occupation at all for the next 700 years? 0. In other words, there's a big hole punched in the Bronze Age around 1700 BC. Right in the area where the Bible put Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, let me ask you just a couple of questions and we'll quit. If you don't ask the right questions, you may not get the right answers. Fact. Bronze Age civilization, after flourishing here for over 2,500 years, now we know probably 23,000 years, came to a screeching halt after that period of time. And the area remained without cities and towns for the next 7 centuries. We say at least 5 centuries. Now we know it is 7 centuries, from at least 1,700 to 1,000. Here's the operative question. Why did the best watered agricultural land in the region remain without cities and towns for the next 5 to 7 centuries following its MB2 destruction?
Fear.
Fear. Well, probably a couple of centuries. The denuded soil just allowed anybody to come back there and live. It took a while for it to recoup. But that's probably the reason. The Bible gives the answer. This one I'm going to show you is, it's shocking, and I really don't even like talking about it, much less researching it. But what I want to show you is a rather remarkable thing that came up at the end of the last excavation season. In fact, this was not my idea. It was introduced onto the evening table where all of us would sit around overlooking the Dead Sea, the palm trees in the background, Jerusalem lights in the distance, sitting around and talking and just having some fellowship. And everybody we just talk. And so Lane Whitmire, who's our architect, came to the table, and she said, she's a great researcher. She's an archaeologist in her own right. And she said, I have something interesting You won't believe this. Just read this. And she started to share all this stuff, and one thing led to another, and all of a sudden now we've got just so much evidence. It's just exploding in abundance. We noticed something interesting a long time ago. Scholars in Jordan, dealing with Transjordan cultures, have long been saying that even in the early Bronze Age, I mean going way back to the 3rd millennium BC, that what they've been saying is that the Transjordan cultures, particularly the Valley culture, had more connection, more affinity to Crete than to either Egypt or Mesopotamia. Now, when you read stuff like that, and you have no context, you have no experience with it, it just kind of, oh, well, that's nice. You don't pay much attention to it. But when she brought this to the table, she said, I think I found the reason why the men of Sodom tried to abduct the angels. And so this grows out of that. Now we've been in contact with archaeologists on Crete, and this thing is just kind of burgeoning, going crazy. It's not comfortable for me to talk about. It's rather ugly, but here it is. Here's the story. Before they lay down, that is, Lot and the angels. By the way, back up just a second. Lot said, the angels, you're going to come to my house tonight. Right? Because they had come into the city, through the city gate, and they said, oh, we're going to spend the night here in the square. Yeah. Lot says, not. You come and stay at my house. But Lot knew something. Yes. He knew something about the nature of the men in the city. So he says, you're coming to my house. So he takes him to his house, and here's what happens. Before they lay down, the men of the city of Sodom surrounded the house, both young and old. It's kind of surprising. Both young and old, representing all the people from every corner of the city. And they called Lot, and they said to him, where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out so that we might have sexual relations with them. And you know the rest of the story. What in the world is happening here? What is happening? This is stunning archaeological evidence of a direct connection between Sodom, Sodom, and what I call institutional pederastia of 18th to 16th century BC Minoan Crete. Now, if you haven't studied this, I'm not saying you ought to, but it's interesting. By the way, pederastia simply, if you look it up in the dictionary, it means anal sex. Yeah. But what it really means, when you go back in the Greek, what it really means is the man-boy love relationship that was required by all Cretans and subsequently Spartans and Athenians of military, for military training. But it plays out interestingly in the Bronze Age. It starts way back in the early Bronze Age and peaks in the Middle Bronze Age on Crete in kind of a bizarre way. So let's look at it. First, what are the connections? What's the connection between Crete and Hammam? Culturally or architecturally or in other ways. Here you see the excavation. Now in 2012, remember I showed you the picture of the Middle Bronze Age gate system. Okay, I showed you a reconstruction of that. We had not excavated the Gatehouse on the inside at that point. That's 2012. This year we excavated the Gatehouse just inside, and typically, what do you get? We talked about it earlier today. We get chambered gates, even going back to the Middle Bronze Age. We get chambered gates, usually 2 or 4 chambered gates in the Middle Bronze Age. And that's what we expected to find. We thoroughly expected to go inside the gate. Here we start to see some of the walls coming up. But all of a sudden, instead of piers, we wound up with, in fact, multiple phases of a pillared building. Here it is. This is the Middle Bronze Age phase. By the way, we discovered that these pillar bases were moved around from the previous building to this building and then knocked around a little bit by agriculture. But here's the building as it's been excavated so far. Notice that there's no straight passage. You can't go straight into the city. You have to go in, you have to make a hard right turn. So you can't go into the city. You can't go to the city gate and look in. Okay? So what we have here is a pillared building that serves as the gatehouse of the Middle Bronze 1, and it goes on into Middle Bronze 2, gate system. You can see the towers. Here are the towers in the front. Here's the passage. Here's the passage to the city wall with this tower, passage through this tower, and we have this gate system, this gatehouse. And we also have a light well. This according to Lane, these are situated in such a way that they would form an opening in the ceiling to let light into the room. Now, this is typically, specifically, a Minoan concept of architecture. This is Minoan. Canaanites never built like this. In fact, we've been discussing this with several guys in Israel. Ami Mazar, in fact, is coming over to Haman this year to see this. It's just bizarre to have pillared gatehouses. Such things don't appear. Now, we think that along the coast in some areas where now they're seeing some Mycenae and Minoan influences, that they're going to start seeing this. But we have this. This is a Mycenaean, 2nd millennium BC style of construction. Pillared Minoan style architecture. All right? Now, then we have this. This is what we call the live, detailed version of it. We have a bull. This is on pottery. This is ceramic. Here's the neck of the jar. Here's the bull. You see his horns. Here's the ears, eyes, nostrils, and his bottom lip. Okay? And we even have a little bit of a kind of a white patch or some kind of a patch on his nose represented here. So here's our bull, but look at his horns. His horns are going down. In Egypt and in Mesopotamia, most bull representations by far, they go up. Even the Canaanite bulls' horns go up. His horns are going down. We have a whole bunch of these in what we call stylized versions, where you just have, in fact, it looks like the McDonald's logo. That's what we call it when we saw it the first time. Now we got lots of them. We said, oh God, it looks just like the Golden Arches. What's it doing on early Bronze Age pottery? It's really weird. But that's what it looks like. But they're actually bulls. By the way, that's parallel at Byblos. Why they call them rams, we now know that they're not rams, they're bulls. And so it's a bull motif. Now what's interesting is, if you take the bull motif and you compare that to bulls from Crete, that's a Middle Bronze Age representation of a bull from Crete. Down horns. Now look at how detailed, it's interesting. Look at, you have the ears, eyes, the nose and mouth, and this little thing going down, this little fuzzy thing going down on his nose. Just exactly the same thing we have in our pottery. So this is a Mycenaean bull depiction, and it's just that way at Talamon. There it is. We have Minoan artistic motifs that are rare in Bronze Age Canaan. Now we do even have some Minoan Mycenaean style things going on the coast, but this connects us pretty heavily to the Minoan area. We also have these. We didn't know what to make of these. These are phalluses. This is a life-size ceramic phallus. We found this in the third season. We didn't know what these were. I mean, we knew what they were, but we didn't know what they were for. What do you do with these? You don't see this in Canaanite stuff. This is just not a thing you see. It's not a motif. But it is a motif in Crete and in Greece. These are man-boy lovers masturbating themselves and so on and so on and so on. So this is Parastua in Greece. Strabo, 1st century explorer, Greek explorer. And most scholars document this institutional pederasty as forming the structure of Minoan society. We're not talking about homosexuality. We're talking about a formal, institutional, cultural-wide practice for the raising of young men. They don't ask you if you're gay or straight or anything like that. This is the way a young man is raised. There's no choice about it. When you are 12 years old, well, let's look at it. This is the way you bring up an adolescent male. Every single one of them in the entire culture. By the way, this was adopted by the Spartan military. The military of Sparta did this exact same thing, and the military of Athens did the same thing. In the first democracy at Athens, you could not vote unless you were a graduate of an 8-year pederastic relationship with a military man. It's required. Right? Now, so what does this look like? Here's the way it works. Male relations with women were kept separate. Women lived in separate villages. They were good for one thing, producing children. The boys stayed with their mothers till age 12. At age 12, the boys were given over to a 22-year-old erastes or lover in a formal, intimate relationship for 8 years. At the end of the 8 years, you have a 2-year cooling-off period in which the man could either choose to stay with his beloved, his eramenos, or he could choose to marry. Okay. The now 30-year-old at the end of this process could take a wife. If he chooses to take a wife, he does. If he does take a wife, then his now 20-year-old graduate, Phoebe, would take his own 12-year-old beloved, and they would enter that relationship for 8 years, and the cycle would repeat itself generation after generation. This is the way it happened on Crete. There was something else about Crete. This was unique. No place else in the Aegean world was the pederastic institution run like Crete. In Crete, the relationship began with a unique feature, ritual abduction. The ritual kidnapping of the young boy. So, if a young boy was spotted or seen that was desirable to a leader of the city, the king, one of his family, anybody in the city of wealth, they would ask permission of the guardians, the parent, whatever, and then they would arrange a ritual kidnapping. You get a gang made up of young and old, and they come to the home and they abduct the boy and they take him off to this room, and that's how it starts, the ritual abduction. And Kathleen Rittmeyer came to the table that night and she said, I think with this Minoan connection we're seeing, we may have a reason or some kind of cultural backdrop for the story of the attempted abduction of the angels. Well, there it was. Influential men of Minoan society would send this gang and kidnap this eramenos, this young beloved, ask permission of the guardians, and it would be considered a cultural slap in the face if it was rejected. If they said no, if something happened, they would not be happy. Now, what happens in Lot's house? What happens in Lot's house is that he takes the young angels. Now, I often think, I can't imagine a homely angel. So they must have been very attractive. And so these messengers come into the city, and I think they're being eyeballed. And now the interest rises, and maybe kidnapping gangs from all over the city, it's a big city, come to Lot's house to say, and they ask permission. They say, send them out. Go ahead. They're not knocking the door down to start. They just say, send them out so that we can do what we want to do. And Lot says, no, not these guests, no. And they get upset. Right? They get upset. What does Lot offer? His daughters. Now this is really interesting. He knew that in this kind of a culture, his daughters would be of no interest. In fact, They were perfectly okay with it, it looks like. And they were ready to go the next morning when Lot left the city. So they weren't taken, they were probably, he knew that they were just refusing. That was not what they were after. And so he was just trying to be hospitable in a sort of a bizarre sort of way. But it was fine. Now, another interesting thing. Why did not, now remember, Lot had 2 prospective sons-in-law. Did not? They were already betrothed to be married, both of his daughters. Why did the sons-in-law not leave the city? I'll tell you why, I think they were still in their relationship with their pederastic boys and were not yet released, according to the culture, to marry. They were still waiting it out. They didn't want to leave, or they could not leave, so they didn't leave. All right, now, what's interesting is that the scripture says, indeed, the outcry against Sodom was great. Who was crying out? Well, Lot wasn't crying out. He was living there. Who was crying out? I think the Canaanites. I think people in the region were shocked by this valley behavior. Canaanites were sacrificing their children and doing all sorts of terrible things with male and female prostitutes, called prostitutes, but they thought this was shocking. So the outcry against Sodom and the land was great. And so here you have some amazing background. I think it's remarkable that an archaeologist's spade could overturn something that then connects and gives us an explanation, or at least an understanding or a background of what's going on in a given culture. To me, it blew me away. It was shocking. It shows how fine-tuned, how accurate the biblical text is to the culture of the time. That we've ever been able to make that connection it just blows my mind. Now, why did God destroy Sodom?
They didn't.
I'll tell you what. It wasn't because of homosexuality.
No.
Because homosexuality had always been there. It was in Canaanite culture. It was in everybody's culture. It had been there. It would always be there through history. That was not the problem. The problem was they had institutionalized it for the entire culture. There was no choice. This was the way they did it. It was an abomination to God. This culture would not be able to stand because he couldn't find even 10 people that were redeemable in this situation. So God took it out. Now, I'm going to let you, this last closing statement, I'm going to let you make your own decision about it. Not only did God take out Sodom sometime between 1750 and 1650 BC, let's say average 1700 BC, you know what else happened in 1700 BC-ish, right in that same time frame? A volcano exploded in the Aegean. Santorini. Thera blew up. It created such a seismic convulsion that the entire island of Crete rocked up. A couple of meters. A tsunami proceeded from that location in the direction of Crete and then the direction of another pederastic culture on the coast called Mycenae. The culture of Mycenae. Both of those cities, both of those cultures were wiped out in that tsunami. Not only was Sodom taken out in the valley by a fire burst from heaven, but just maybe not so coincidentally, the entire mother culture was taken out with 2 tidal waves. The tidal waves are a historical fact. We know how the Minoan culture and Mycenaean culture ended at the end of the Middle Bronze Age. So there it is. Now, why did God destroy Sodom? I'll close with this. Well, most people say, well, was there sexual deviance? No. No, it's not what God says. Ezekiel 16. Go read it. Ezekiel 16. God says, because you were arrogant, because they were arrogant, wealthy, did not take care of their neighbors, widows and orphans, because they did detestable things before me. The detestable things that we always want to lock in on are on the tail end. The stuff that really caught God's attention was that they thought they were invincible. They thought they were so powerful that they didn't need anything but themselves. God took them out. By the way, God says that He will restore Sodom to its fortune. In Ezekiel 16 it says, I love Jerusalem, I'm going to restore Jerusalem. I think He will. He's going to restore Jerusalem. But because Jerusalem is far more evil in the sight of God than Sodom ever was, God says, because I'm going to restore Jerusalem, I love you, I'm going to restore you, but I'm also going to restore Samaria as a result. And then I'm going to restore the fortunes of Sodom and bring her back to her graves. So when God restores Jerusalem, guess what? Samaria and Sodom are coming back too. Not the way they used to be, but a resort with an 18-hole golf course and something worthy. So Sodom's going to come back. I think it's a scream. And people say, "Wow, that's a metaphor. Why would God bring Sodom back? It's just a metaphor." No, it's not. He's going to bring Jerusalem back. He's going to bring Sodom back. He said so. He promised.
Right.
So there you go. Well, anyway, that just goes to show you that we'll finish this. Sodom narrative carefully marks out a location for the cities of the Kikar north of the Dead Sea on the east side of the Jordan River, where in fact the ruins of significant Bronze Age cities do exist, exhibiting all the cultural influences described in Genesis. Such a high degree of correspondence between text and ground cannot be a mere coincidence.
Amen.
Now, here's what we close with. If in the past, archaeologists, Bible scholars had taken the Sodom tales seriously, if they had, they would have discovered the civilization in the land of the Kikar a long time ago. But they didn't. And they didn't. We took the Bible seriously, and they were there. We found them, because the Bible says they were there, and they were there. So what I say is, everything is in the right place. Everything is in the right time frame. Everything has, all the right stuff is there. Which shows me that the Bible, Dr. Beaver, the Bible and the trowel do work remarkably well after all. And that's all I have to say about that. Thank you.